This is the world's toughest podcast. Welcome to the world's toughest podcast, where we talk about any obstacle course race you'd like, as long as that's world's toughest mudder. Each week we talk to members of the WTM community and share stories of success and failure in the single greatest event in OCR. My name is Will Hicks, and this is the world's toughest podcast. On today's episode, Wesley Kerr. But first, I want to thank you for your iTunes reviews and emails like this one from Fred. Hello, love your podcast. You're always prepared with great questions. Doing my first WTM this year, and I will have family as pit crew. Any chance you can interview a successful pit crew to learn the do's and don'ts of a good support team? Looking forward to the next podcast. Fred G. from Fullerton, California. Thanks for the email, Fred, and that is a great idea. As the season goes on, we will definitely do an episode that's 100% pit crew. So thank you for that. If you have any episode ideas, shoot me an email at willhicks@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Something that came up in the last 24 hours in the World's Toughest community is Sean Corvell. Sean is the start line MC for a lot of the Tough Mudder events, or has been in the past. The word is that Sean will only be at 9 events this year, and the community is not happy about it. There are several threads talking about how important Sean is to Tough Mudder. Tough Mudder's personal Facebook page has dozens of people posting pictures of Sean and how much Sean means to them and how meaningful he's been to their lives. We know he'll be at all 6 toughest events. He's already been at New Orleans this year. That's 7. He'll be at World's Toughest. That's 8. And then the 9th event, we don't know what it'll be, but maybe the Tough Mudder 5K in Nashville on August 12th. We're working on a Sean Corvell appreciation episode of the podcast to air sometime soon. Cassie Harris is helping me put it together. If you'd like to share a story about Sean and what he means to you, call the World's Toughest voicemail at 302-786-9868. That's 302-RUN-WTM-8. Leave your name and tell your favorite story about Sean, and we may use it on the podcast. This is our 3rd episode this week. If you didn't catch the first 2, you should check them out. Episode 7 was all about the first tougher mudder ever this past weekend in New Orleans. Episode 8 was Matt B. Davis of Obstacle Racing Media, with clips of his interview with Eli and Nolan of Tough Mudder headquarters. On today's show, Dr. Wesley Kerr with last-minute tips and a course talk-through of Toughest L.A. Also known as Dr. Red Tights, Dr. Wesley Kerr has been a fixture of the world's toughest community for years. His notable WTM accomplishments include winning the green sprint lap bib for fastest first lap at WTM 2015 and completing 90 miles at WTM 2016 and winning 7th place overall, beating other notable finishers such as Nicodemus Holland, Jun Young Pak, and Will Hicks. I'm happy to welcome my guest, Dr. Wesley Kerr. Hey, Wesley.
Hey.
Thanks for taking the time to do this. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's super fun.
Hey, before we start, you and your wife are pregnant. How's she coming along?
She's doing pretty well. We're 38 and a half weeks pregnant right now, so it's any day now.
That's exciting. Is this your first kid?
Yeah, first kid.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
I thought we could talk about 5 main areas for toughest Mudder L.A. Pacing, nutrition, pitting, obstacles, and then general strategy tips. Anything else that might help. Let's start with pacing. You wrote a great article on Mud Run Guide about pacing. Where should I be at 4 a.m. if I want to hit 25 miles?
I think an interesting thing is that article was written before we had the map, which should technically change things, but should not also change things at all. My basic adage for distance running is that you want to keep the same intensity the entire time, and that means the same pace the entire time, with the exception of as you get towards the end, you want to start speeding up a little bit. So if you view intensity like that, then it doesn't really matter what's going on course, what different challenges you have, as long as you can feel in your body this is how much I'm pushing, keeping just that comfortable pace that you can keep over 8 hours is going to hold you true. But as the sprint lap title shows, that sometimes I don't actually follow my own advice. It's actually one of my problems sometimes, that I start too fast. People are going to start too fast, and it's totally natural to do so. It's just sort of catching yourself and reining yourself in. Mm-hmm. I think because there's going to be so much more elevation in the second 4 hours than the first 4 hours, that the number of miles that you'll be running is so substantially different. So you should expect most of your miles to come in the first half, but I still think most of your work should be evenly distributed across the two.
If you just want to get 25 miles, that's your goal for the 8 hours. Do you think you have to have 15 miles done on loop 1?
Probably, yeah. It would make the most sense to me to have the cutoff be, okay, when it hits 4 a.m., when you finish this lap, you're going to go over to the next one, next course. Mm-hmm. So you want to cross that 12.5 mile mark at 4 a.m. or before. So you're going to finish that 15-mile lap on the original flatter course. So if you've just finished 10 miles before 4 a.m. and you get switched to the second course, you got to pick it up a little bit to try to hit that. And it's going to be actually picking it up because it's going to be harder to hit it.
What about the guys who are shooting for 50 miles? Where do they need to be when the switchover happens?
If you're shooting for 50 miles, it's less of an issue because your laps are quicker. But it's probably the same thing. If you want to be at least at 30 miles, I would say, you probably want to take advantage of the flatness of the first set of laps. So I would say you want to be at least just slightly past 25 when you hit 4 a.m. And then you could run a little bit more time on the flatter course. And then you've only got 20 miles on that crazy hills.
Let's talk about the obstacles. I'll read through the list of the obstacles, and then maybe we can just talk about them as we go and kind of our thoughts. I know you have some certain strategies for like stage 5 clinger, but on the first loop, there's 13 obstacles. I'll just read through them and then we'll talk about them. Mud Mile 2.0, Devil's Beard, Quagmire, Rub and Tug, Ladder to Hell, Block Ness Monster. The 7th obstacle is Skid Marked, then Pyramid Scheme, Shawshanked, Berlin Walls, Soggy Bottom, Kiss of Mud 2.0, and the 13th obstacle on the first loop is Everest 2.0. One thing Tough Mudder has not said anything about is which obstacles have penalties and which ones do not. They've said that there will be some penalty obstacles, but they haven't specified which are which.
Yeah. I think it's pretty clear which ones are which from history.
Okay. So of those first 13, which ones do you think are going to have penalties?
So the ones that I expect would be mandatory are Mud Mile, Devil's Beard, Quagmire, probably Rug and Tug, Ladder to Hell, Block Ness, Skid Marked. Really all of them except for Everest 2.0.
Do you know what Rub and Tug is?
Not really.
I don't either. I'm not familiar with that one.
I think Rub and Tug is, based on the picture, something to do with tires. So it might be like, think of Spartan plate drag with tires, or just dragging. It could be a la Worlds back in Raceway Park. We had a tire drag that was like a good 400 meters long.
Okay. I think you're right. I think you're right about almost all of those are going to be must complete. On Everest 2.0, I don't know if you remember, about 2 months ago, they released a list of 5 toughest obstacles. And one of those was Everest 2.0, but half of it was the grappler. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
So they haven't said anything about that since then, but I wonder if that's... if that also, another one of those 5 obstacles was, they called it Hero Walls. It was Berlin Walls, but they had a shelf coming out toward you. It would be a lot harder to use your feet to help you scamper over the wall. It was more of a pull up and a muscle up to get over the wall. So I don't know if they've forgotten about that or if they're hoping we forgot about it.
I think one of the great things about Tough Mudder is they put these things out and they make you think about it. And sometimes they forget about it. Sometimes they don't. So it's part of the joy of going into a new Tough Mudder event of you're not necessarily sure what you're going to see.
It's exciting, right?
Yeah. I think the grappler modification to Everest, because a good deal of people can get up Everest 2.0 by themselves, probably just makes it easier, actually. Because if you can get it up by yourself, you're like, I have this thing in my hand, I don't care.
Yeah.
And if you can't get it up, get up by yourself, now you have something to help you get up by yourself.
I think what will happen is if you need the grappler to get up, then you'll have a short penalty lap, kind of like the 1.0 at World's Toughest.
That would be a good modification. I like that idea.
But we'll have to see.
Yeah.
Let's talk through Loop 2. Loop 2 has a lot of the more difficult obstacles. It starts with King of the Swingers, then Augustus Gloop, Abseal, Arctic Enema, The Rebirth, Death March, Stage 5 Clinger. The 7th obstacle on Loop 2 is a mystery obstacle. Black Hole, Balls to the Wall, Cliffhanger, Funky Monkey, The Revolution. And then at the end of the map, it's hard to tell. There's Kong and Electroshock right next to each other. So I guess we should, in a minute, we can go through them all, but that'll be interesting to see what they do there.
Yeah. So the ones with penalties are King of the Swingers definitely is going to have a penalty. There have been some interesting talks about what King of the Swingers is. Probably it'll be a la Double Rainbow. It's been told that it's going to be harder than Double Rainbow. And I remember when I was doing like the promo for World's Toughest with Double Rainbow.
Sure.
They were talking about it like it was actually sort of easy.
Right.
And they said this is harder than that, so I think it might actually be challenging for them. The course creators were saying they can make Double Rainbow like 90% of the time.
Okay, sure.
If they're saying this is harder, that means that it's probably going to be like they can make it maybe 75% of the time, maybe 50% of the time. So I think we're going to see something pretty interesting. The other thing that's going to have a penalty, Stage 5 Clinger will just be hard. The rumor is that the mystery obstacle is going to be Operation, but given that location. So for people that have been at this event already, they'll remember that on the back half, you sort of see like you're on asphalt for a little bit, and there's like a green meadow and like a structure back there. And usually they just have like a water station back there and really not that much. They could technically build Operation out there, but it looks like it's on a hill. It doesn't really look like it's going to be Operation there, I would say.
We're used to seeing Operation at World's Toughest on that concrete pad. But I don't think they need a concrete pad to do it. They just need something flat.
They need something flat. But if it's exactly where they put that marker,
right?
There's a super steep hill that you have to go down to run away from it. So they would have to go up it. And you need like a flat section to build that platform.
One argument in favor of that being Operation is they listed those 5 toughest obstacles, and the only one that's not on the course map is Operation.
Yeah, so that's why people are saying this is Operation.
Stage 5 Clinger, going back, so the mystery obstacle that we think is Operation, or could be Operation, is number 7. The 6th obstacle is Stage 5 Clinger, and it looks a little, I don't know if you saw any of the videos from Tougher New Orleans last week, but they've made some modifications to Stage 5 Clinger since Worlds.
Yeah, I saw a few of the videos a little bit.
Basically, the biggest thing is there's like a metal bar that's at the end that you do your pull-up on, basically, to get up to the top.
Okay.
They also removed the archway. It's flat on top instead of kind of an uphill arch. What's your strategy for going up Stage 5 Clinger?
So I think Stage 5 Clinger, they think of it in their head as they want you to do a muscle up. And just like most obstacles that you see in obstacle racing, the first thing you think of is probably not the best way to do it. What a climber will look at with Stage 5 Clinger is they look to see, how can I use my legs to do this? Sure, we're going to see this maybe 2 or 3 times over the whole thing. So if you've got muscle ups, power to you. I don't have muscle ups. What I did at Worlds that worked out really well, and it sounds like these modifications, based on the videos that I've seen and the descriptions I've heard, they don't change my strategy at all. What I do is I go to the end rung where you're supposed to do the muscle up, and there's always an upright next to you. And what you want to do is essentially turn your body towards the upright a little bit and do like essentially a toe to bar, or just swing your legs up to straddle the upright. And you can cross your legs and pull with your legs so that your hips come up to the level of the upright. And that'll be pretty close to where your hands are. And then you sort of just scoot yourself over, and then you're done. It sounds pretty gymnastic, but once you get there and you do sort of just swing it over, it's like, oh, wait, this is actually not that bad.
Talking about obstacle technique, we kind of skipped over Augustus Gloop. That's another one of the new obstacles this year. How do you go up Augustus Gloop?
Augustus Gloop is more about sucking than technique. Essentially what it is you've got a circular tube. You've got a ladder on either side. So technically, if you wanted to stay in the center, you could climb one ladder with your left hand and one ladder with your right hand. It gets really awkward, especially if you're a human and have shoulders. So what I did with it is I put my back on one side and I climb one of the ladders. Think of it like I'm always pushing against one side with my back, and then I'm just climbing the ladder with my hands and my feet on one side so that I actually have space. And that makes it pretty easy.
You're kind of pushing against the left ladder with your back, and you're scampering up the front on the right side with your hands and feet.
Yeah, and look down.
Yeah, so you can breathe.
Yeah, there's a fire. Technically, there's a fire hose. It's not as strong as a fire hose, but there's water coming down your face, so you look down until you can't hit up anymore.
After the mystery obstacle is Black Hole, which is a modified birth canal, then Balls to the Wall, and then Cliffhanger. Do you know what Cliffhanger is?
Yeah.
I don't remember Cliffhanger.
I always mix up Cliffhanger with things. Cliffhanger is essentially, it's not a real obstacle.
Is it like going down a steep hill and they throw a rope down kind of thing?
Yeah. Okay. And that looks to be about the correct place in the map where they would need that.
Kind of like Death Marches, but the opposite, just going up a really steep hill.
Yeah. Actually, I know that specific hill. That is, they need ropes to go down that hill.
Okay. The last three obstacles, the 11th obstacle is Funky Monkey, the Revolution. That's going to have to be a penalty obstacle.
Yeah, that's going to have to be a penalty. And the rumor is that they've made, instead of having 3 cycles, where you've got the flat one, the flat rotating wheel, and then you've got a giant wheel and a medium-sized wheel. Mm-hmm. Apparently, they've made that third wheel into a single pole.
Oh, yeah. I saw some videos of that from New Orleans.
Yeah.
I wonder why they did that.
It's probably easier to build, and it makes it so once you get to that pole, you're not swinging as much, so there's less people falling in at that last one. Because if you're falling in by the platform, you have risk of head injury on the platform, maybe.
Sure.
I think it just makes it easier. So I'm not too worried about that.
Okay, so on the map, Kong and Electroshock are right next to each other, right at the finish line.
The talk that I've heard is that they'll have it set up as the Tough Mudder, and I don't think they'll make... When they have it set up as the Tough Mudder, the finisher, the Legionnaire obstacle, is right next to EST. And it's a little bit awkward to run back around and do EST, but I do every obstacle every time, so people are like, oh, you're finishing, and I'm like, no, I got to do EST first. I've been hearing that they've been saying is that you're going to have a choice to do Kong or EST.
Okay.
And Kong is a super hard obstacle. It'll tax your grip. And EST, it's super easy if you run through upright and you don't smack your face. If you're okay with EST, the route is do EST and it will be faster.
Right.
Especially for like a final sprint or something. You got a final sprint through EST. You can't final sprint through Kong.
No.
I think it'll be parallel. So you have a choice, which will be interesting.
I wonder if you fall on Kong, then you have to do EST, or...
That would be intriguing. EST as a penalty for Kong. Mm-hmm. That would be... I would like that. EST, If you need to go through at a final sprint and you're going for placing, then you got to suck it up and do it and hope you don't faceplant. Protect your head. But my usual strategy is to think of it like an electric eel, just with more vertical clearance. So
you kind of slither through it.
Yeah, you slither through the bottom. You can do that pretty fast. There's a hilarious video of Rennie Kaufman and me doing that. And you get shocked maybe a couple times, but it's really not that bad.
I hate EST so much.
Yeah. My policy is every obstacle every time. So around about the end of 2014, I stopped going through EST upright because I think Western New York in 2014, I got shocked in the head, and I was suddenly like upright to my face is almost planted in the ground, and I caught myself.
Yeah.
But I think it's sort of like a conditioning thing with the mice experiments that they learn to associate the shock with the environment, and I think I've learned, and I'm like, I don't like this. This is not a thing. So I slither through the bottom, and I have no shame.
It'd be great if you could train your brain that you could associate the shocks with, oh, I'm almost done, or I'm about to get a headband, so that you like, oh, this is great.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. I think the best way to do that would be have the headbands like seconds after you finish. Like
right.
There's almost standing in EST, then you could see them and you can like taste them.
They're usually pretty close.
They are close, but the closer you are, the more you associate it with it. Because you can't actually see the headbands when you're going through EST.
Maybe we can get Kevin Chow to stand inside there and give you a headband as you go.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Wesley, do you want to talk about the difference in elevation between the two loops?
Oh, yeah. So I think we talked about this a little bit already. If you know this venue, if you're looking at the map for the first one, you park and you've got a whole bunch of flatland, and you've got Mudder Village, and essentially the first lap, you're staying pretty close to Mudder Village. What looks to be like after Quagmire and Rub and Tug, you're sort of going up a subtle hill. And this hill's, and then you go down this hill to hit Ladder to Hell. So Ladder to Hell, you're basically back at the same elevation. That hill is maybe 100 feet. 200 would be pretty generous. Mm-hmm. And then that back section, where you've got Pyramid Scheme and Shawshank and Berlin Walls and Soggy Bottom, things like that. That's a quad bike sort of track. So it's a little bit rolling, but it's mostly you're going super fast. So you really don't have any elevation that first 5 mile loop. They might have done this so that people can actually hit 50 on this course. Because if you made more elevation during that first lap, it would be sort of impossible to hit 50. Before this map came out, I was like, people are not hitting 50 at LA.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of miles happening really fast on Loop 1, I think. It's just a mild little push after you hit Rub and Tug to get up a little hill and then come down.
So the first loop has one small hill. What about the second loop?
Second loop is the exact opposite of this statement. So the second loop, if you see the start, you come up, you come around, you go to King of Swingers. That's all super flat. It's essentially letting King of Swingers be by Mudder Village so people can take pictures. Augustus Gloop is a similar thing. And then when you come around and you're going, curling around up to Abseil, that's gigantic hill. They usually, if you're going down that hill, they give you ropes to go down that hill as well.
Okay.
Think of that like another death march. And then you come around and you're going down the hill, and then you come up the hill to do Abseil. And then you're sort of on that ridge line or coming up and down. And then you get Arctic. And then Death March is, so that hill we talked about on the first lap, where it's like maybe 100, 200 feet incline. Mm-hmm. You're going up that again for Death March. And this one, you're going up to a higher section of it. So it's going to be even higher. And then after Death March, you've got sort of some rolling / downhill / flat. So it's not a big deal. In Black Hole and Balls to the Wall, you're really running on a road, so it's not too big of a deal.
Okay.
And then when you come around to Cliffhanger, that's a super big hill, and that'll suck. Sort of hardcore. Mm-hmm. And then sort of you're running the ridgeline again, and then you come down a super steep down decline, and then you do sort of like that snake thing at the end.
Right.
Usually, I'm just like backpedaling. That's like the controlled falling to the max, because you're just trying to fall. So that's sort of how that lap goes.
Let's talk about the pitting. The pit area is going to be a lot different for toughest than it is for world's toughest.
It's a third the time domain, but you should have less than a third of the stuff. I very much agree that if you need more than a 2 feet by 4 feet, you're doing it wrong. Since Eli in their podcast or their video talked like specifically about a table, I really think they're going to have like rows of tables. The most efficient way to do it would be have a giant tent with 2 entrances and just rows of tables, sort of like bag check.
Sure.
And somehow they would have them spaced out enough so pit crew could be in there and do things. Ideally, with the 2 entrances, exits and entrances on either side, people could just like run straight through, and it doesn't really matter where your bag is. I sense that probably won't be the case. Probably they'll just have 1 entrance, and you got to run in and run out and hope that you don't have a spot in the back,
Right.
Or have a pit crew. 8 hours. There's a lot of things that are simplified. Really, you don't need extra nutrition for the first 2 hours if the race was only 2 hours long. If you don't eat extra nutrition the first 2 hours, then you're behind on your nutrition. So what I like to think is 200 to 250 calories per hour. You want to start early. You don't want to build up a deficit. So continue eating. The only real time where you stop eating and stop taking in calories is that last hour, because it takes you like an hour to absorb the calories. So that last hour, as much as you want food and you're super tired and super hungry, it's not going to be useful. So
Wesley, tell me again, when do you start eating?
So do a lap. As much as you're like, oh, I'm totally fine, I would chug a thing of Tailwind already after that first sprint lap.
Okay.
So
and you can stop at like 7 hours because it doesn't matter anymore anyway.
Yeah. So my general strategy is your goal is 200 to 250 calories an hour. You do a lap, you take some Tailwind, take some beef jerky, and you do another lap, do it again. So it's a common thing for people to like do the sprint lap and be like, oh, I'm totally fine, and not taking any calories.
Mm-hmm.
It's better to do that for the last lap. So sprint lap, take in some calories, keep on going, make it take like 30 seconds or something like that. That will serve you better than the opposite, where in the last lap, you take in some calories because you're hungry, and you take a few minutes, and then you go out for that last lap, and you desperately try to finish by 8:30.
Mm-hmm. We kind of backed ourselves into nutrition. There's some difference of opinion whether you should stick with goos and gels or if you should do like real food like pizza and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Nutrition is a very personalized thing. I think you really should experiment with your nutrition during training and during other events as well. And your naturally toughest is going to be an experiment, and it's going to be preparation for Worlds no matter what. You find that different people have very different tastes. And your taste is going to change a good 3-4 hours into the event. Your taste will change after 12 hours of an event as well. Things that you're like, oh, I super love this. After like 3 or 4 hours, you'll be like, I can't eat this anymore. I need something else. I just can't put it in my mouth. And it's hard to predict what that will be. For me, it's very simple foods. So like spices or spicy food or things where you're like, oh, this is like delicious. It's probably going to be too complex for you during an event. So think simple things that will give you easy energy. So that's why I like Tailwind is fancy Gatorade for those that don't know what Tailwind is. It's built by an ultra runner that didn't like, I think, powdered Gatorade. It gave him the runs during ultra marathon. So he's like, I want to build something that will be okay for your gut, will give you the runs, and just you can survive on that for 24 hours during an ultra. So it's super simple sugars, and it's got electrolytes in it as well in a good mix. Mm-hmm. Carbo Pro is also super popular in the ultra world. My first few years, I actually just used powdered Gatorade, and I was okay. Sometimes I would get the run, sometimes I wouldn't.
When you say powdered Gatorade, are you eating the powdered Gatorade, or you're actually mixing it and making Gatorade in your Camelback or in your cup at the pit?
I'm mixing it and mixing it.
Is there any advantage to using powdered rather than just buying it off the shelf?
It costs less money.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Costs less money. Technically, you can control the consistency of it. There's like recovery Gatorade and there's like full strength Gatorade. Recovery Gatorade, I think, is just diluted full strength Gatorade. You can say, oh, I need more electrolytes. Let's make it a little bit more concentrated.
Sure, stronger.
Or I'm sweating a whole bunch, which you probably won't do until like 6 a.m. or something like that. Then you put some water in it. I would say most other people that are not me believe that, especially in a 24-hour, you need like a real meal, like solid food, or else your stomach and your GI are like, what is going on? And then part of the runs is you just don't have any fiber in your belly. Like having a sandwich or just having pizza or having like a bread or a bagel or something like that, people have said is super helpful. Quesadillas, I've been heard are wonderful as well.
What about pre-race nutrition, the 12 hours or the 24 hours before the event? What should you eat?
So for an 8-hour race, it's different than a 24. And a 24, you want to worry about not having a bowel movement, so you reduce your fiber. But for an 8-hour, it's less of an issue. So I think it's just healthy eating and eating what you usually do. You just want to make sure that since we're starting at midnight, you're usually fasting at midnight. So I would have a little snack at like 10 p.m., 11 p.m., just to make sure you're up on your calories and absorbing as much as you can.
What kind of snack would you have?
It's a good question. Probably going up to the event, I am sucking on a bladder or tailwind and having a few granola bars or something like that.
Okay.
Essentially getting my body used to my in-race nutrition. I don't think it particularly matters as long as it's not like, I wouldn't have like a hunk of protein. I'm thinking just like carbs and vegetables, maybe.
What about for dinner, like 6 hours before the race?
I would eat the normal dinner you would have. If you think of what you want to order and you think like, oh, this will be heavy, you probably shouldn't have it. But otherwise, it's the natural range of what you would have. So like chicken and fish, super good. Having a salad, totally okay. I don't personally believe in carbo loading. So the theory behind carbo loading is that your liver stores glycogen. And if you have more carbs, then your liver will store more glycogen. And the glycogen is it's essentially sugar stored in your body so that when you get to that 18, 19, 20 mile mark, your liver won't be completely depleted. If you're stuffing your liver full of glycogen, you have those glucose stores to last a little bit longer. I think your liver is pretty good at doing that overall.
Right.
The real way to carbo load is to carbo starve yourself. So like do no carbs for like the first 4 days of the week before and then carbo load for 3 days before. That maybe has some effect. But I don't think the effect is really big enough to really do anything. I think the main problem that people run into when they try to carbo load is they're just eating so much. Their stomach is just heavier with all that pasta or all that rice.
Right.
And it slows them down. Makes them more tired, sort of like a food coma.
Sure. Let's just talk some general strategy tips. What do you think about the weather for this weekend?
This year has just been crazy for weather. The weather this weekend doesn't sound like it's going to be LA weather. If you're local, you can change what you're going to pack. If you're not local, you unfortunately have to pack for all situations within the realm that is feasible for LA. So if you're not local, I would probably pack a 3 mil wetsuit. I highly doubt we'll use it. I would probably pack some sort of cold gear, windbreaker, of course, and then like a thicker top and a thicker bottom. Think like you're running in the snow, but you're not getting rolling in the snow. Like you're running in 30-degree, you're running in 20-degree weather, you want to stay a little bit warmer, that should suffice. When we start getting a little bit wet, then we start talking about maybe frog skins, maybe some of these like half wetsuit, half not. For people that don't know what frog skins are, it's a little bit late to get frog skins now if you're thinking about ordering them because they come from Australia. But they've got a fleece inner liner, and then they've got like a 0.5 mil to 1 mil neoprene, and then got some compression fabric on the outside. So they claim to be super quick drying and also are warmer because they got the neoprene and the fleece. I wore them at I wore them at Worlds. I also wore them at the Spartan Ultra Beast last year, and I actually was overheating at the Spartan Ultra Beast in frog skins.
I was at a scuba shop this last week, and they had a thing called shark skins, which, to my untrained eye, looked pretty much the same as frog skins. They were at least comparable.
I have not heard of them, so I don't know.
Speaking of wetsuits, what is your thought for an 8-hour race starting at midnight? Are you going to wear a wetsuit or not?
I highly doubt it. If it's raining actively, then I'll probably wear my frog skin bottoms and frog skin tops with a windbreaker. I think it won't be bad enough to have a full wetsuit on.
Do you think the answer to that question is different depending on if you're like hoping for 25 or hoping for 50?
Absolutely. A great example of that is I was talking to Chris Mendoza, who got 100 last year, and I got 90. And one of the main things that we did differently is that I took some time to put a 3 mil wetsuit on, and he survived the whole thing with frog skins. And usually he beats me, and I'm totally like, we were talking about teaming up beforehand, and one of the things I was saying is I'm just going to slow you down. So usually he beats me, but we're sort of similar.
Sure.
And I think me getting my wetsuit on slowed me down a little bit more versus him staying in frog skins.
You think it slowed you down because of the transition, or it slowed you down because of the decreased mobility?
Both of these things. So the transition to get it on and off, probably my wetsuit transitions were the longest transitions of all my pit. And then you have decreased mobility. It just takes a little bit more effort to do everything in a wetsuit. If you can survive without it, then you survive without it. The key is you don't want to get too cold, because once you're cold, it's really hard to come back from it. The people that are running like 50 miles, like Chris and myself and Trevor and Ryan, we're burning a huge amount of calories. And when you're burning a huge amount of calories is actually a measure of heat. So you're generating more heat. If you're going slower and you're aiming for 25, if you're aiming for 15, you're not burning as much heat, you're not generating as much heat. So when you hit like Arctic Enema, the Rebirth, where you're in that ice for a little bit longer, or you hit Augustus Gloop, you get sort of like the half wetness of like Quagmire and things like that. That'll suck more and more of the temperature away from you. So I could see a wetsuit being warranted at that point.
So if it's not raining, your plan is to line up at 11:59 with no wetsuit on. Yeah.
If it's not raining, I'm not feeling super cold at that point, then I will line up for the race with just my red tights, and may or may not have a windbreaker on. If it is raining, I probably will have frog skin bottoms on and a windbreaker on. After the sprint lap, I will see if I want to put my frog skin tops on.
I feel like I should offer a disclaimer because I am absolutely wearing a wetsuit. So I don't want anyone to listen to this and be like, well, they said we didn't have to wear a wetsuit. So it's everyone's personal decision. But I guess your advice is if you're planning on going fast, you probably won't need it because you'll warm yourself up. And if you're not a 50-mile guy, you definitely want to think about a wetsuit. Yeah.
I would say there's more water in the second half, and you're going to be going slower in the second half. If you're on the fence about wetsuit, no wetsuit, I would start without a wetsuit and see how you feel.
Sure.
But have a very low barrier to switching.
Yeah. Arctic Enema is in the second half.
Yes.
Have you ever done Arctic Enema with a wetsuit on?
I have.
Is that any different?
Yeah. It's really not a thing.
No big deal.
Arctic enema in a wetsuit. I did this in Worlds of 2012, which was my first Worlds. Given I was also wearing a 6 mil wetsuit at a large portion of this race. In 2012, Arctic enema was basically the penalty for every obstacle. Like, you couldn't get up Berlin Walls, do an Arctic enema. You couldn't get up like Everest, do an Arctic enema.
Jeez.
This was also, we had a gigantic lake swim twice on that course. I got pretty used to jumping in the Arctic enema, and if you jump out pretty quickly, the insulation of the neoprene is enough so it buffers your skin. So, like, you jump in and you jump out, you're like, oh, it just got wet. You can't even tell that it's icy water.
I wonder if the buoyancy of the wetsuit will be a factor with going through the tubes now in Arctic enema.
It'll probably keep you up a little bit. I'm not sure too much. It will make a huge effect.
What do you think about running tough or tougher on Saturday before toughest on Saturday night?
I think if you're going for distance on toughest, you will be moving some of that distance that you would do during toughest, and you're moving it to Saturday. I think if you want to do as well as you can at toughest, you should not run Saturday. You should also be wary about being out in the sun for huge amounts of time on Saturday, because that's just going to tire you out. If you're doing it more for fun, and you're thinking, I'm not 25 isn't even in my range, or 25 is super easy, even if I do it on Saturday, then I would see running on Saturday okay. But if you're going for 50, I wouldn't risk it. If you're going for like a personal goal of 40, I also wouldn't risk it. Or if you feel like 25 looks pretty daunting to you, I would come say hi on Saturday and be on the course for like an hour or two. By on the course, I mean in Mudder Village.
Sure.
But otherwise, I would not run the course.
How many participants do you think there'll be at toughest this weekend?
I think Kevin Chow said 600. Kevin Chow somehow has ways to tell these things. He has magical powers.
The start wave at World's Toughest is generally about 1,200 to 1,300, so about half that size.
600 is probably a slightly larger normal wave. Like, think the waves at noon, and that's probably a 400 to 500 person wave. So
your wife is 38 and a half weeks pregnant. What are the odds that new baby changes your plans this weekend?
What I've learned from my OB-GYN rotation and from Baby This is that as much as you try to predict baby will have a mind of its own. I'm sort of acting like it's not going to be a thing, but totally willing to pull the plug.
Sure.
From the whole time, I've said I want to run 2 toughest. Part of that is contingency planning for if Jane pops during this toughest.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be an issue if I'm going to predict things. Currently, she's had like one isolated contraction like 3 days ago and nothing since then. So she's not super active, but I think once she gets to be like showing that she's gonna pop soon, it's gonna be like, okay, we have like a day until she actually pops.
Right.
So we'll see. I know that if things continue to be as they are right now, then it won't be an issue, and she'll be induced the Wednesday after Tough Mudder. So
after my last kid was born, we were sitting in the room, and my daughter was on my wife's chest, and I was sitting on the chair on the other side, and the nurse is there, and this is a few hours after that she was born. And I said, I don't know about you guys, but I am exhausted. And no one else thought that was as funny as I did.
Yeah.
Well, cool. So you've written a couple articles on Mud Run Guide about toughest coming up. What are the titles of those articles so people could find those easily?
If you like my articles on Mud Run Guide, a good way to find all of them is at the bottom of any article I've written, there's a link for view all posts by this author, and you can look back at the archive. I've been writing for them for a while. So there's a number of things, including rules breakdowns and like New Year's resolutions and things like that.
Well, Wesley, do you have any other last-minute tips or advice or thoughts on Toughest Mudder?
The one other thing I want to plug is, well, being a Tough Mudder ambassador, all of your Tough Mudder ambassadors have 30% off codes for first-timers that we would desperately like to use. So if you're talking with someone that wants to do a Tough Mudder, or if you want to entice them to do a Tough Mudder, talk to a Tough Mudder ambassador. We can sweeten the deal, make it 30% off, and that'll help you a little bit. My personal code is brand227, so BRAND, all caps, and then 227. I think it's going to be super exciting. I think we're going to learn a whole bunch about a new racing domain that we're not used to, but I think that's why we do obstacle racing. We're always trying to find something that's different from what we usually do. I'm eager to see what the crazy people that are super fast are going to do. I'm also eager to see how the community responds to the 8-hour time domain and how they feel about the contender status and versus not. And I want to see what the average distance is and what people like finish with and go, I'm super proud of this. Because I always love seeing people that you look at and you're like, they're not going for speed, but they're going for personal goals. And I always love hearing what those were and seeing people be like, I didn't hit it, but I worked really hard and I'm totally happy with what happened.
Special thanks to Wesley Kerr for appearing in this episode. Thanks a lot, Wesley. Don't forget to call the world's toughest voicemail and leave your story about Sean Corvell, how he's affected your life. The phone number is in the show notes. I will see you guys in Los Angeles this weekend. Thanks a lot, you guys.